The problem is the good productive peoples their rage is rising. It's getting to the kind of place where it's almost reconquista kind of level. This, financialist regime has stolen a century and a half worth of human productivity. Revolution, if there's a second one in the United States, won't be against the British. It's going to be against our own government, who are the British.
Is a revolution coming to the United States 250 years after the last revolution? Is Trump instigating it, or is it something that the enemies of Trump are doing? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Hi everybody, it's Wednesday the 28th of January. I'm recording at 8 minutes past 10 in the evening. I'm joined by EM Burlingame and Ivor Cummins. I'll have their links in the description below. Now, for all of you that are subscribed, that are commenting, that are watching, that are sharing, that are giving the thumbs up, thank you so much. Please carry on doing that because it helps this channel grow and it helps beat the algorithm. Hey EM, hey Ivor. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Oh, hey Rich.
Yeah, the last time we were together was in September on my old channel, which is still up, but I now post here because this is pure politics. Rich Does Politics is the name of the channel. So we had the stuff that was going on in Minnesota, the tragic deaths of 3 protesters, the vilification of ICE for doing law enforcement. And then I think what happened is the government released, or somebody released, some signal information which showed that the lieutenant governor was involved in organizing these protests. I did a video with Joaquin Flores where we talked about how these protests were astroturfed with big money coming in. And Tim Walz and Trump have a conversation. There's an about turn. The police, the local police, move in, do police operations, break up the protests. And now what's going to happen? EM, I'll come to you first.
We have a leviathan in the form of of liberal democracy, and it's coming to its end, inevitable end, as it always does, right? 250 to 300 years, 350 years is the longest it lasts. When you have this vast bureaucratic state that is so involved in so much corruption at every level, vast corruption beyond anything that people have imagined before, it will not go away without a fight. And this is how revolutions happen. People are, the faith and confidence in liberal democracy as an institution is pretty much gone. And I don't see anything that they can do to restore it.
Wow. But what about all the people that voted for Trump, and they voted for the illegals to be deported, and they voted for the borders to be closed? They're getting what they voted for.
Well, absolutely. But again, what did Kennedy say a couple of weeks before he died, right? 10 days before he died, we were set against by a vast conspiracy. And then he died 10 days later or so, right? Assassinated. This liberal democratic, fraud and corruption regime is hundreds of years old. It was it was fostered by the Venetians. It's over 1,000 years on. It's in everything. It's riddled through everything. It's broken everything, stolen everything. Of course, we'll try and preserve what we can preserve, because what are the alternatives? We go back to feudalism. Well, the truth of the matter is we already have feudalism. We just don't accept it. It's in the form of this vast wealth disparity. And instead of, the traditional manorial estates, now it's vast investment portfolios. Yes. Family offices, multifamily family offices, multi-generational family offices. These are all, this is a return to feudalism. And we just have the imprimatur of, self-rule. And now that imprimatur, the illusion of it is coming down right in front of people's eyes.
Ivor?
Yeah, well, so we're looking at making a new movie on Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley. I know EM will know it, and you know it too. And I kind of always looked at our problem being the globalist banksters running the show, you know? Ah, there you go. You know, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Wallenbergs, and all of Wall Street, and kind of the Crown in England and City of London. And they're all, like Alex Craner says, this Ponzi of fiat money that they profit from enormously. They need to keep stealing other countries' collateral. That's why we get all the wars, yada, yada, yada. But when I read Tragedy and Hope 101, it's at joeplummer.com, PLUMMER.com. So it's the short version. It's only a few hours read. I said, it's the network. And it kind of originated broadly with Cecil Rhodes and the Milner Group. And then it grew. The City of London took over America again and got Wall Street back. And all the banksters came in, all the big families. So it's an easy way for me to view it. And I viewed the Biden administration as being puppets of that network that brought us COVID and brought us most of the horror of the last 100 years, including the 2 world wars and the Fed and the income tax in America. And they had Woodrow Wilson as a puppet they put in 1913. So I view that as the big problem. The big question for me now is most of the trouble is coming still from the Democrat left, who are puppets of the network, the globalists. And then the big question for me is Trump pushing up against them? Is Trump trying to make a new America, you know, Don Roe doctrine and get things fixed up a little? And he's pushing back against the globalists, like recently in Davos, and all the media they own, they hate him. The network seems to hate him. But the question is he really just with them, but very cleverly a form of controlled opposition at the highest level, that he's giving populist stuff like we're going to stop migration and we're going to get rid of woke, but it's all a scam. And Trump is really in with them. And that's the thing that I struggle with.
Which is an answer to the question, which could be an answer to the question I said at the beginning. Is it Trump that's stoking this revolution that's coming? Or is it the opposition, you know, or like you're saying, it's a sting.
Well,
he's setting us up.
Broadly speaking, I got to be careful here now and remember everything Trump's doing. But he's gone up against the climate pseudoscience. I won't say the words that trigger. But you know what the climate thing is. It's Rockefeller, Rothschild from the 50s. It's complete doo-doo.
Malthusian,
yeah. I mean, it's just, and it's so technically stupid. It took me around a day to look into it after the COVID thing. And I could not believe how absurd the whole lot is. And I'm an engineer, like, and physics guy. It's absurd. So Trump is going up against that madness. He's going up against the woke family destroying madness. He's going up against the mass migration madness. He's going up against a load of strategies from the network. But again, it comes back to the Civil War, if there is one. I don't see Trump pushing it. I see him enraging, absolutely enraging the puppets of the network. It seems to me, that's how it strikes me. I mean, if the puppets of the network, the Democrats and the left, just reacted by grumbling and being annoyed and being angry, there'd be no problem. But look what's happening. Now, there was a thing recently came out, and I don't have the details, but I thought it was interesting. There was a Catholic guy, specifically Catholic, that Obama had in a senior role as Obama went after mass migration. And apparently the numbers are that Obama got around 500,000 pushed back out, highly rewarded and decorated this Catholic guy. And no one said a word, really. And now Trump's only had a couple of 100,000. I think the same guy is involved. And there's absolute civil war about it and all the ICE Minnesota stuff. So I'd ask, you know, what's driving all the anger? Trump's just getting real serious on mass migration, and his claim is criminals, etc. Maybe not, I don't know. But it's the reaction that's driving all the real madness. It strikes me as that way.
Yes. And that Catholic guy I think you're referring to is Tom Homan. He worked
Rings
under
a bell. I
Obama,
only saw it
and
earlier.
he worked under Obama. He got an award while he worked for Obama, and now working for Trump, he gets vitriol and hatred in the MSN EM.
They can't take any, there is no wealth or productivity or assets left amongst the American people to take. They just can't take anymore. We are indebted for 4 to 5 generations out, debts that we can't pay. Now they're figuring out clever, sophisticated ways to, remove some of the debt or excuse some of the debt or just transfer it to some other new system, et cetera, right? All kinds of complex stuff that, Tom Luongo and others talk vastly better than I can. But I don't think they understand the rage that is created when the recommendation as how to deal with the housing crisis, meaning people's inability to afford housing, is a 50-year mortgage. It's created rage amongst a vast number of people. This, financialist regime, the financialist kill chain has stolen a century and a half worth of human productivity. And now they're locking in the steel by this transition to a new currency system, a new financial tokenized currency system, because that's what it's doing. That's locking in a century and a half of steel, of theft, of debts, wealth, asset values created by this vast amount of debt that the average citizens are not going to participate in. That's so why is the vitriol and the rage coming? Well, the way in which this faction of the network is trying to address this fundamental problem is to cut out the graft. And that's a very valuable thing that needs to happen. It's a very laudable thing. But just cutting out all of the graft and fraud and corruption doesn't address the fact that a century and a half of Americans' wealth has been stolen. And that wealth is people's lives. It's the actual productivity of people's lives. Just stolen and being, formalized in this new financial currency system.
And to that point, EM, I remember a few months ago, there was a lot of talk of whether Trump was for CBDC or not, and there was stuff about the constitutionality of it. That was quite a while back, and it just occurs to me, I haven't heard a whole lot about that in the last couple of months. So is Trump all in with that?
No.
Or not quite all in with that? I'm not sure. I don't know.
I don't think, well, they're doing it through, they don't need a CBDC because they can do many of these types of things through the stable coin. And through access, tokenized. I was just watching Miles Harris do a show on this just before we came on. They can control your access to capital and liquidity. They don't need to have a total programmable, CBDC currency, et cetera. It's not necessary. And for all intents and purposes, we have, these types of capital controls now. I mean, look at the bank accounts that are being frozen by certain people, the truckers in Canada, a couple leading peoples like Scott Ritter and some other folks have had their bank accounts frozen, et cetera. So the ability to do much of what people are worried about with CBDCs already exists.
Yeah.
Right. As long as you have money in the banks, that already exists. So most of that is, I believe, personally, is fear mongering. It's, to get people in this fear place. Go pay attention to this. Don't pay attention to this other thing we're doing, locking in $100 trillion or $200 trillion of stolen wealth into, this new tokenized system where it's going to be virtually impossible for you to ever recover that wealth.
Yeah. And the only extra thing with CBDC, and from my perspective, is when they use the banks to go after you, at least for what it's worth, you can go to your bank and they tend to explain what happened. Yeah. Well, the government told us to, or you have to give us these documents. So there's some recourse. With CBDC, your bank will say, we don't know, you're going to have to ring this number in Geneva or East Coast USA, which won't answer. So there isn't even a semblance of like any recourse to justice. But there was another one recently. I don't know if you saw this one. Gold and silver, obviously, the banksters don't want ordinary people buying gold and silver, or silver miners. But recently there was a flurry of activity where the transfers to gold bullion companies by private citizens were stopped by the bank. One bank, I think in particular, based on fraud concerns. You know it wasn't fraud concerns. So that's just another example of using the current system to keep the people down.
Yeah. So again, a century and a half of theft and another century ahead of us of indebtedness, indentured servitude, shall we say. And, I do, again, laud, I don't believe Trump's trying to cause a revolution or civil war. In fact, that faction of the network don't want a civil war or a revolution. That's the last thing they want. Why? Because they would be a target. Right? We are at this revolution, if there's a second one in the United States, won't be against the British this time, the redcoats. It's going to be against our own government, who are the British and the redcoats for all intents and purposes. In fact, they become more abusive than the British of the 1700s ever imagined. It's even worse over there where you all are. So this faction, of course, doesn't want a civil war revolution. That's also why they come to some agreement with Waltz in Minnesota. More than likely, the deal that was made is we're going to let you keep your stolen wealth. So, Waltz, maybe you've got $333 billion that you took out of all the theft and graft, and it's in these accounts, and these structures, et cetera, here, and here, and you're going to keep it. But in order for you to keep it, you're going to back down against the federal government, and you're going to go ahead and act lawfully in your own state. If you don't, then we will take these funds. That's generally what happens, right? These deals get made. The problem is that the people, the actual people, the good, patient peoples, the good, productive peoples, their rage is rising. It's rising, and it's getting to the kind of place where it's almost Reconquista kind of level.
And if you look at Europe, and we might talk about that more later, but just even as an example, so Spain now is going to give citizenship by a royal decree to 500,000, I think, illegal migrants. I mean, that's almost not just doing something very wrong, but it's almost rubbing the people's noses in their own problems.
It's a declaration of war against the people. Either the people rise up and do a Reconquista in Spain again, right? And the same here, or the people demonstrate that there isn't the spirit of fight in them, and the network does whatever it wants to.
Yeah. Now we will, if I can come in, we will talk about Europe in the subsequent conversation. I want to keep it to the United States here, right? And I think one of the things that shows that Trump is not working in service of the City of London, the network, is how much opprobrium they lay upon him, how much he's vilified by the mainstream media. I mean, this whole thing, and I'm sure, as a fellow United Kingdom, you're in Ireland, right? But you will be familiar.
Yeah, I mean, British Isles, as they say.
You'll be familiar.
The Irish rebels will be annoyed at me saying that, but in fairness, in spite of the history, we're now all united, regardless of the history, against the major problem. No question about that.
Yes, but this whole story about how the US has been, Britain is US's puppet, and the US runs things, and Britain is US's puppet. It's a conversation that I'm familiar with through my days in the anti-war movement against the Iraq War and Afghanistan War. Britain is just doing whatever US does, and it should have its own independent foreign policy. Well, actually, Britain's really pissed off because the US is not doing what Britain wants it to do. It's like Alex Craner, he introduced me to Master Blaster from one of the Mad Max movies. This giant blind thug with a dwarf on the shoulders of the thug, and the dwarf is the brains telling the thug what to do. And now it seems that one way of looking at this is Trump has thrown the dwarf off and the dwarf is really pissed. He's really pissed.
We signed divorce papers. We filed for divorce 250 years ago this year. And now we're finalizing the divorce. Yes. And the bitch is pissed.
That makes sense to me, because I saw something a couple of years ago, guys. Could have been even 2020 during the COVID scam. But Trump was in, and I noted it. I was a manager for decades, and I just noticed subtle stuff about people's interactions. And the reason I thought Trump was really pissing off the network, one of the early signs, well, like you said, Rich, the media, the globalist media, is attacking him around the clock. And they wouldn't need to do that much attacking to give him credibility as controlled opposition. They simply wouldn't need to. It's been off the scale. That was one thing. The other thing is, I saw him coming out of Davos a few years ago. And Schwab was trying to keep up with him and running around and clearly nervous and clearly upset and clearly against Trump as he chaperoned him out. And all the media there, and Trump was saying, we're going with America's great again. We're not doing your globalist crap. And he was saying all this stuff. And Schwab was clearly, visibly, authentically angry with Trump and very uncomfortable. And you can't feign that. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't try and feign that to give Trump credibility. Trump is not maybe in all our interests, but there's something he is pushing against the major organism in some manner.
He's doing what Putin did starting in the 2000s and what Xi had to do starting in 2011. It's the only way. It's the only way that America survives at all. And unfortunately, I know a lot of people don't, but these things always go to blood. Somebody makes a mistake, someone goes too far, and then it just spirals, because there is genuine, absolute wrath and growing rage about the theft and about, yes, we can stop the ongoing theft, the ongoing graft, the ongoing alimony payments that we've been paying to Europe for 80 years. And the child support we've been paying to the United Kingdom for 200 some odd years. All of that's coming to an end, but it doesn't deal with the hundreds of trillions of dollars that have already been stolen. And how do the Americans get that back? Which probably won't. It's in offshore structures, it's in offshore systems, it's being tokenized now, which is providing additional layers of near impossibility for recovery. And that rage is building and building and building. And I know, again, Tom Luongo and others talk about all these sophisticated things, but one of the problems as a human being, and as an engineer and as a business guy, right, it's complexity. Once things get beyond a certain amount of complexity, they're not real anymore. They don't even have the ability for us to believe that there's any reality to them. And so we just don't participate.
Yeah.
Why? Which is why they flooded us with all these people, to create this ant jar so that we spend the next 300-400 years fighting each other. And this gets to us here in the United States and to Europe. How long did it take from the Islamic invasions until the first Crusades? 300 years, almost 400 years. And then the Reconquista took even longer, and we were still fighting in the 1600s in Eastern Europe, right? So my concern right now is that if we don't get some kind of a civil war revolution, we're going to have a Islamic-like occupation of the United States that causes conflict for the next 300-400 years.
Well, I think,
quite aside from the financial theft, right?
I hope the United States has been saved from that. And I speak as a Muslim immigrant in Britain. I think, and we'll cover this in the subsequent conversation about what's going on in the British Isles and Europe. It doesn't look so rosy for Europe in that regard. But one other thing I want to say about where Trump is, controlled opposition or not, is his whole I don't think the globalists want him to prevail in the United States, because it shows an example of what could be possible. And that's the same deal with the British, where they killed President McKinley and President Lincoln and President JFK and possibly FDR and a few others, right? Because they didn't want them to prevail. Same reason the French are out to dethrone Traore because they don't want him, that model, to prevail. Same reason why they got rid of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, because he was putting in the American system of political economy as well. But the other tell, the British don't like Russia. Russia is too big, needs to be broken up, and in the unsaid, so we can better extract the collateral within Russia. And Trump just won't play their game.
Yeah, terribly sorry, Rich. I don't. Yes, of course, the natural resources are important, but the way in which these folks' minds work, they want to break up Russia so they can have smaller states to play off against each other.
Yes,
it's why they want to break up the United States, so that they can play the states. They can't have these large continent-sized kinds of nations, because that's a power that they, physical power, as we're seeing in Ukraine. If they need to, they can go to war and they can crush you and destroy you. Same thing with the United States. So they move to break us up, flood us with a whole lot of people that don't belong here, that'll never be part of us, never fit in. This isn't, when I say Reconquista, I don't mean just against Islam or Muslims, right? This is a broader thing. Their intention, though, is always to break up the states so that the smaller states, they can play off against each other ad nauseum forever. And then that way they get the resources at very low prices, and they get the individuals in those smaller states to basically, at slave wages, extract those resources.
Yeah, and it's the classic divide and conquer, and it's so frustrating that the vast majority, because they've been programmed to think that anything relating to powerful, influential people working against our interest in a coordinated way, any of that is a, quote, conspiracy theory. It's been the most effective psyop of all time, I think. So ordinary people can't see the obviousness. I mean, I had a guy, just as an example, and he was talking about, but Russia's a threat to Europe and even Ireland in the worst case, right? And I'm laughing. And I say, okay, I'll do a simple thing. Your media, all of our media, the RTE Guide, the Irish Times, the whole lot of them, and all across the Western world, screamed at us that Russia was pathetic. Russia was losing. Russia had 1 million dead. Putin had cancer. What a mess. What a joke. And on a dime, they switched around and said, Russia can come and Putin can come and just take over the whole of Europe, even though he was an idiot who couldn't even do Ukraine, right in his backyard, a little country. And I said, so you know for a fact, you don't have to be an engineer here, you know they're lying to you whole scale and fully on pretty much everything to do with that. And the person had to think, and they didn't have words. So I broke through. But you got to break through with the rest of them. God almighty, it's pathetic.
That's the piece I wrote yesterday about how powerful cognitive dissonance, cognitive biases are, and how they're used, especially by, for the ones who are either cowardly or just don't want to get involved. And those circuits are so powerful. And I've seen people, trained people, look at evil in the face and not see it, because it would require the rewiring of the brain and their sense of reality. And so they look at right at it, and they can't see it.
Yeah, which is the challenge for all of us, because I read that article, absolutely brilliant article, but it got me thinking, well, where am I not seeing something that's right in front of my nose? Because otherwise I'm fooling myself if I think, oh no, I got the truth now. I mean, I do think I've got the truth, but I also get that I could be fooling myself here.
But on a positive note, Reg, if you're interviewing and discussing things openly, there's a great book called Mindset, by the way, everyone should get, about closed mindset and open mindset. It's not political, it's brilliant psychology. But if you're relatively open, which you obviously are, you're interviewing guys like EM, or even talking to me, or Craner, and just put together a stable of people who are unbiased, with sharp minds, with geopolitical knowledge, you're not going to miss much. I mean, we're here arguing about whether Trump is fully in with them or partially. We're down to the finer points. No, I wouldn't worry about missing much worth a damn. I think I could be naive, but I wouldn't worry. I have the whole Maverick network as well, all the hedge fund managers, investment guys, you guys. I mean, once you've got a great network that you've validated, I think you're pretty immune to major blind spots.
That's fabulous, Ivor. And this, what I offer on this channel is a great network with both of you, Anna Alex Trainer and Tom Luongo and Susan Kokinder and Blaine Holt. And it's a growing stable. So
Yes.
thank you both. I'll have the links in the description below. Please, thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, thumbs up, helping this channel grow and beat the algorithm. We will be back soon. This is Rich, EM, and Ivor signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.